In the quiet coastal town of Ashbury, Maine, during the late autumn of 1987, a particular story unfolded. It was a story of quiet echoes and profound remembrance, one that perhaps only a close witness, someone standing just near enough to hear the faint rustle of old paper, could truly tell. That story, held in the stillness of a small house by the sea, deserves to be shared with the world. Its true beginning was not with a word, but with a sound. The first sound of that particular morning was the kettle. A low, tired whistle rose through the dark kitchen, a sound like breath being drawn through an old wound. The clock read 4:42 a.m. This was the hour when the world remained more shadow than solid shape, a time when only the truly faithful or the deeply haunted were awake by conscious choice. Evelyn Holt sat patiently at her simple kitchen table, wrapped in a familiar wool shawl that had grown thin and worn at the elbows over many years. Her hands, knotted with age but entirely sure in their purpose, waited for the kettle to finish its call. The rising steam began to fog the cold window pane behind her, obscuring a view where dawn was still just a distant idea rather than a tangible light. Beside her sat an old leather-bound journal. Its outer edges were curled from decades of handling and devotion. The pages within had yellowed, becoming as soft and pliant as old fabric. A simple pen rested across the cover, lying still like a musician's instrument between songs. The cover bore a faint embossing that read, "Evac Hospital 14, 1944. Evelyn no longer needed to look at that faded date. She had long ago memorized the profound weight of it. It marked the year she first began her solemn task of writing the names. The kettle finally hissed to a boil, and she rose to pour the water. The mug she used bore the fine cracks of long and faithful service, its handle showing a thin, silvery line of mended solder. She carried the steaming cup to the table, then sat down once more, lowering herself carefully into the chair as her knees clicked in quiet, familiar protest. Outside the small house, the cold world was waiting patiently for the sun to arrive. Inside, in the warmth of the kitchen, it felt as if the room itself was waiting for her to begin. With a steady hand, she opened the journal. The silence of the room seemed to fill with the presence of the names written on page after page. Every single line was penned in her precise, slanted hand. Michael D. Kearns from the 1st Infantry due to pneumonia. Robert, known as Bobby Lyle of the 7th Armored, from leg amputation and shock. Simon Ortega of the 83rd from an excess of medication in the field. The list continued, hundreds of names, perhaps even more. Each name carried a small annotation, perhaps a time, or sometimes just a single, simple word. Some sang, some smiled, some prayed, some asked for their mother. This was her unbreakable ritual, her most solemn promise. It was a promise she had made in an entirely different world, long ago, under a torn canvas roof in France, when the air was perpetually thick with the smells of iodine and smoke. Every single year since the war had finally ended, Evelyn rose before the dawn on November 11th. She brewed her tea and she wrote the names. She was not writing all of them at once, as she had finished that monumental task long ago. Instead, she transcribed one full page for remembrance, always timing her work to finish at sunrise. It was a sacred promise, kept to the countless young men who had not made it home. Directly above her, in the ceiling of the kitchen, a floorboard creaked softly. Her granddaughter, Lucy, a girl of 12 years and full of bright questions that did not always have simple answers, stirred in the bedroom just above. Evelyn paused her hand mid-letter, the very tip of her pen suspended just above the paper. A faint smile touched her lips, and then she continued writing. The pen scratched softly as it moved across the aged paper. The sound it made was deliberate, almost reverent. Each stroke of ink felt like the steady, unfaltering rhythm of a heart that refused to stop beating. A single candle flickered on the table beside her. Its gentle light made the fresh ink gleam wetly for a moment before it dried into the page. The names there on the paper seemed to shimmer for just a second, as if they were alive again. Lucy padded quietly down the wooden stairs, enveloped in an oversized sweatshirt, rubbing the lingering sleep from her eyes. She whispered her grandmother's name into the quiet. Evelyn did not look up from her work, but answered calmly, letting her know she was in the kitchen. Lucy's footsteps were soft on the floor, uncertain, as if she felt she was crossing onto sacred ground. Her eyes took in the scene, the candle, the open journal, the act of writing. Evelyn commented on her being up so early, her voice low but perfectly clear. Lucy explained that she had heard the kettle. Evelyn called the kettle a traitor, and she smiled at her own remark, just a brief flicker of humor. Lucy's gaze drifted down to the open journal. She asked if those were names she was writing. Evelyn confirmed that they were. Lucy frowned, pressing to know whose names they were. Evelyn explained they were men she once knew, and some she did not. Her hand stopped its movement on the pen. She added that all of them had passed through her hands. Lucy tilted her head, trying to understand, and asked if they were like her patients. Evelyn gave a single, slow nod. The girl then asked why she wrote them every single year. Evelyn paused for a moment, not because she lacked the answer, but because some truths are simply too heavy to hand over to a child all at once. She finally said it was to remember. It was also to make absolutely sure that someone, somewhere, still said their names out loud. Lucy looked from the flickering candlelight to the inked lines glinting on the page like small black rivers. She asked her grandmother if she had promised them. Evelyn confirmed that she had. Lucy asked the simple question of why. Evelyn met the girl's eyes directly. The blue in her own irises had faded with time, but their clarity had not. She explained it was because she was the very last person that most of them saw. A sudden gust of wind pressed against the kitchen window, rattling the old latch. Outside, the dark horizon was finally beginning to pale. A thin thread of rose-colored light started spilling over the tops of the distant pines. Evelyn turned her head toward it. It was almost time for the sun. She slid the heavy journal closer and found the next blank page. Her hand trembled, just faintly, as she wrote the date in small, even letters, noting November 11th, 1987. After the drills had concluded, the facility was silent, aside from the low hum of the ventilation system and the soft thud of a medicine ball striking the floor. Hale walked past the training center window and observed her inside, alone, sitting on a bench. She held a small patch in her hand. It was faded, and the stitching was barely holding it together. It depicted a black snake coiled tightly. She turned it over in her palm one time, then a second time, before tucking it back into her pocket. From Hale's vantage point, she appeared less like a coach and more like a phantom recalling the form she once inhabited. Outside, the sky over the facility burned orange and gray, the specific color of conclusions that still possess something left to communicate. And although none of them realized it yet, before that week reached its end, Coach Mendez would demonstrate to everyone precisely who Black Mamba truly was. By the third week, the recruits no longer referred to her as Coach Mendez when she was not present. Now they used a different name, partially in jest, partially in awe. They called her Black Mamba. The nickname lingered in the air like smoke, a thing that was whispered, never spoken loud enough to tempt fate. Nobody admitted to originating it, but it was fitting. It fit the way she moved, it fit the way she spoke, it fit the way she could dismantle bravado with a solitary glance. Even the senior drill instructors afforded her space. That signaled to the recruits everything they needed to understand. The morning she finally broke her professional silence occurred by accident. It was the final week before their advanced tactical drill, the ultimate test before being cleared for a field assignment. Nerves were taut, muscles were sore, egos were bruised. Coach Mendez had pushed them relentlessly, and they were operating on sheer willpower. The schedule demanded a stress endurance drill. This involved 10 stations non-stop while wearing their full field kit. There were sandbags, pull-ups, tire flips, and rescue drills. All of this was under the punishing Virginia sun. Hale was leading his small team that morning, wholly determined to earn her respect, even if he never vocalized that desire. The air carried the scent of dust and iron. She shouted for them to move, trainees. On her count, they were to go. The group surged forward. 5 minutes into the drill, someone fell behind. It was Morales, Hale's closest friend, who was gasping for air, perspiration pouring into his eyes. Hale asked if he was good, pulling up alongside him. Morales panted that he was. He just needed a second. Mendez barked that there were no seconds. If you stop, you start over. If you want a break, you can take it after you are finished. This was not cruelty. It was precision. She understood exactly when to push and when to ease off. But that particular morning, the heat was utterly merciless. By the time they reached the 8th station, Hale's legs were shaking. Morales stumbled once more, much slower this time. Mendez called out to Morales. She warned that if he quit on this, he would be quitting on his team. Morales nodded, forcing himself back to an upright position. He acknowledged, "Aye, coach." However, his hands were trembling. His skin had turned pale beneath his tan. Hale recognized it, the look of someone who was well past their limit but far too proud to admit it. Hale said, "Coach," that he was not looking right. Mendez glanced over but did not reply. Her voice remained steady. She instructed them to finish the round. They did finish, somehow. When the stopwatch finally clicked, everyone collapsed. The sound of desperate gasping filled the entire training field. Morales, however, did not move. Initially, no one noticed. Then, Hale observed him lying motionless, his eyes half open, his lips gray. "Hale," said Morales, shaking him. He shouted, "Hey, Morales!" There was no response. Then everything unfolded rapidly. Panic, shouting, boots pounding on the sand. Someone yelled for a field medic. Before Hale could even react, Mendez was already at his side. She knelt beside Morales, checking his pulse, then tore open his vest and began resuscitation. Her hands moved like clockwork, calm, methodical, and terrifyingly efficient. She instructed someone to call it in, without looking up. She added to get her an IV kit. One of the instructors hesitated. He said, "Coach, we should wait for..." She snapped, her voice low and sharp. She commanded him to do it, now. And the manner in which she said it, not asking, not pleading, but commanding, made even the seasoned servicemen obey without question. Someone sprinted for the medical truck. She continued working. Compress, breathe, compress, breathe. Hale knelt beside her, attempting to assist, his hand shaking. He said that Morales was burning up. She identified it as heat stroke, severe. They needed to bring his temperature down immediately. She tore her hoodie off and poured water over the fabric, pressing it against Morales's neck and chest. Her eyes darted, scanning the field. She ordered them to get those sandbags under his legs as they needed circulation. The medical team arrived 2 minutes later, but by that time she had already stabilized him. His chest was rising shallowly, his breath ragged but steady. One of the medics glanced at her, surprised. He asked if she was trained. She just nodded a single time. She replied that she used to be. When they carried Morales away, Hale remained standing there, breathing hard, the adrenaline still buzzing through his veins. He turned to her. He stated that she knew exactly what to do. Her voice was calm. She replied, "It would have been a bad day to forget." That evening, the barracks were quiet. Morales was in the facility hospital, listed as stable. The recruits sat on their bunks, the fluorescent light humming above them. Someone finally verbalized what everyone was thinking. The thought was that she saved his life. Yeah. Another asked if they saw her hands. They were not even shaking. Hale remained silent. He could not stop replaying the incident, the way she had moved, the way she had assumed charge without any hesitation. There was no panic, there was no fear, just absolute certainty. And that specific tone, that command voice, the one that slices through noise and chaos, the kind you only acquire after years of leading people through intense situations. That was not the voice of a fitness instructor. The following morning, Hale found her outside behind the training center, sitting on a concrete step, lacing up her running shoes. He hesitated before speaking. He said that Morales was stable. They said he is going to make it. She nodded, tie in the knot tightly. She replied, "Good." He asked, "Coach," speaking quieter now, what she was before this. She looked up at him, her eyes clear, unreadable. She asked, "Before this facility?" He confirmed, "Yeah." She leaned back against the wall, her hands resting on her knees. She replied, "Special Operations, Joint Task Group, a long time ago." Hale swallowed. He asked if she was Black Mamba. A slow smile crossed her face, the kind that held both memory and sorrow. She said she had not heard that name in years. He stated, "So it is true." She did not answer immediately. The air between them felt heavier somehow, full of things that did not require vocalization. She asked softly if he had ever taken a life, Hale. He froze. He replied, "No, ma'am." She advised him not to, not if he could help it. The organization will tell you it is a responsibility, and perhaps it is, but it does not leave you, not ever. Her tone was not guilt, it was truth, flat, quiet, and utterly final. Hale did not know what to say in response. After a lengthy pause, she stood, brushing off her knees. She said, "All right, serviceman, you have PT in 10. Do not be late." Over the next few days, she changed. Not in the way she trained them. She remained relentless, but something about her softened around the edges. There was a little more patience, a word of encouragement where previously there used to be only silence. She even made a joke once, dry and entirely unexpected. She asked if he called that a pull-up, Hale. Her grandma could do better, and she has arthritis. The entire room laughed. It felt human. But underneath the humor, there was still that quiet gravity, the specific weight of someone who had already walked through the inferno and made peace with the heat. By Friday, Morales was back on his feet, pale but smiling. The unit organized a small cookout outside the barracks, and for the very first time, Coach Mendez appeared without her hoodie. She wore just a plain t-shirt and ID tags that caught the sunlight when she turned her head. The recruits tried not to stare, but Hale noticed the tattoos, coordinates inked faintly along her right forearm. He did not ask where they led. He already knew better than to ask. They laughed, they ate, and they swapped stories. Even Mendez participated, listening more than she spoke. When Hale offered her a paper cup of soda, she accepted it, clinking it lightly against his cup. She said to Morales. He grinned. He replied to Black Mamba. She shook her head, smiling faintly. She asked him not to call her that. He asked, "Why not?" She replied, "Because she buried her a long time ago." Hung in the air, quiet, true. Then she took a sip, her eyes drifting toward the horizon where the training field stretched out into the dusk. That evening, after everyone else had retired, Hale sat alone on the barrack steps, observing the floodlights hum across the empty lot. He reflected on how quickly the room had gone silent whenever she entered. He thought about how laughter had transformed into respect. He contemplated how the legend of Black Mamba, the one they had joked about, had turned out to be entirely real, and standing right there in front of them all along. He did not know if this realization made him proud or humbled. Perhaps it was both. What he did know was this one fact. There was a type of strength that shouted, and there was a type of strength that had no need to. Coach Mendez belonged entirely to the second kind. The live range area sat on the far edge of the facility, where the forest thinned into sand and scrub. It was the kind of place where sound carried, rapid reports, shouts, the crackle of heat in the air. It was late in the afternoon, the sky turning the color of old brass. The recruits stood in a line, helmets on, training pieces checked, faces streaked with dust. For most of them, it was their first time engaging in a live field simulation. For Coach Mendez, it was just another day breathing the familiar air of controlled chaos. She was not supposed to be present, not officially. Non-service personnel were not cleared for live range drills. But following Morales' collapse, the commander had made an exception. He had told her to keep an eye on her boys. He said she had earned that. She had not planned to intervene. She had planned only to observe. The exercise began as routine: cover drills, advance, drag, retreat. Hale led his team, focused and sharp. The acrid scent of the range filled the field, stinging the throat, tasting like the conflict. Mendez called from the sideline to move, move. Shots popped in short, controlled bursts. Targets dropped in rhythm. The recruits were finally learning the flow. No hesitation, no wasted motion. Then the incident occurred. A sound that was too heavy, too close. Not a standard training report. Then a detonation. The blast punched the air, knocking bodies sideways. Dirt and intense heat rolled across the line like a wave. Hale hit the ground, his ears ringing. The world went white, then brown, then to nothing. When the haze finally cleared, chaos had completely replaced order. Someone was down. A smoke canister had misfired, ignited a nearby fuel supply used for vehicle simulation. Flames licked across the sand, devouring it rapidly. Instructors were shouting over one another, attempting to account for everyone present. Hale pushed himself up, coughing. He yelled for Morales, asking where. Morales called from the far side that he was good, his voice cracking. But Davis, he was injured. Mendez was already in motion. Her helmet was off, her vest dropped, and she sprinted through the smoke. Her body moved before her mind could catch up. Pure instinct, that old rhythm she believed she had buried. She found Davis half buried in debris, injured in the leg, penned by a collapsed barricade. His eyes were wide, shocked, like a child caught in a storm. She told him to stay with her, her voice low and steady. She told him he was fine. He tried to say coach, but she cut him off. She repeated that he was fine. She crouched, braced herself, and lifted the barricade with a sound of exertion that did not seem to belong to someone of her size. Her shoulders trembled, but she held it long enough for Hale and Morales to drag Davis clear. Then she was back over him, assessing the injury. Pressure, wrap, a pressure dressing. Her hands moved without pause, her voice crisp. She ordered Hale to keep pressure on that. She ordered Morales to radio command. Tell them they needed extraction and medical support immediately. Neither of them questioned her tone. It was not a coach's voice any longer. It was a commander's voice. Minutes later, the small team's captain arrived, shouting into his radio. But the scene had already been contained. The flames were dying down. The recruits were accounted for. Davis was stable and conscious. And Coach Mendez, Black Mamba, stood in the middle of the range. Dirt streaked across her face, her breathing perfectly even. The captain stared at her for a long moment, then gave a short nod. He said it was good work, Mendez. She just replied that he will live, and turned away. But Hale caught the look in her eyes as she walked off, something distant, pulled taut between pride and deep grief. It was like part of her had slipped back into a world she had sworn she had left behind. That evening, the training center lights were off, except for one light over the far corner. Hale found her there, sitting on a bench with her elbows on her knees, her hands clasped tightly. The patch was back in her palm, the black snake frayed and faded. He stood in the doorway, feeling unsure. He stated that she saved him. She did not look up. She replied that she did not save him. She just did what anyone trained to do would have done. He stepped closer. He said, "No, coach, you did what no one else could have done." A silence stretched between them, both heavy and soft. Finally, she asked if he knew what that nickname used to mean. He shook his head. She said, "Black Mamba." It was not meant to sound cool. It meant you did not miss. Ever. You got one opportunity, one objective, and you took it. Clean. No mistakes. She turned the patch over in her hands. That kind of precision, she continued, is not discipline. It is detachment. You begin to think of everything as an objective, even people. Hale hesitated. He concluded, "So you left." She nodded slowly. She confirmed, "Before it left me hollow." The light flickered above them, humming at a low frequency. She said she thought teaching here might be different. Just push kids, get them stronger. But watching them all today, her voice broke for the very first time. It is the same game, Hale, just slower. He did not know what to say, so he remained silent. After a moment, she slipped the patch into his hand. She told him to keep it. She said he had earned the reminder. He frowned. He asked, "What reminder?" She replied that strength is not about how hard you struggle. It is about how fast you step forward when everyone else freezes. She stood up then, her shadow stretching long against the concrete wall, and walked out without saying another word. The following morning, the rumor spread through the facility like wildfire. Some say she had been pulled for an investigation into the incident. Others say she had volunteered for another overseas assignment. Nobody knew for certain. All they knew was that the training center felt different without her. It was quieter, but it was not emptier. This was because every time Hale called cadence now, every time a recruit began to laugh through the pain, they caught themselves. They straightened up. They focused. Somewhere in the distance, they swore they could still hear her voice stating that, if you stop, you start over. 1 week later, a package arrived at the barracks. There was no return address. Inside was a single gray hoodie and a folded note. It said, "Only to keep your edge. Teach them right. Signed, M." Hale did not need to wonder what it meant. He folded the note, tucked it securely into his locker, and looked out toward the training field, where the next group of recruits was already forming up under the early morning light. The legend of Black Mamba was no longer just a rumor. It was a lesson, one that lived on in every single push-up, every sprint, and every breath. 2 months went by. The summer heat rolled in heavy over the facility, pressing down on the training fields until every breath felt earned. New recruits came through, fresh faces, loud voices, the same old pride attempting to conceal fear. Coach Mendez was gone. No one said where she went. There was no official word, no goodbye. One day her duffel bag was gone from the locker room, and that was the end of it. But her absence remained loud. Hale felt it most acutely during the mornings, the silence before the dawn, when she would normally call cadence, that steady rhythm of move, trainees, echoing in the ribs. Now there was only the sound of boots and breath, and something essential missing beneath it. He had stepped up as the lead trainee, guiding the new class, repeating the phrases she used to say. Sometimes he caught himself using her exact tone, the low, even command that did not need to shout. It made the other recruits straighten up without realizing why they did it. She had said strength was not about struggling. It was about stepping forward when others froze. That particular lesson had sunk in deep. Then, one morning, just before the sunrise, the alarm sounded. It was a shrill, gut-punching sound that cut through the barracks like a sharp blade. It was not a drill. The announcement was Facility Emergency, Fire in Supply Storage Sector C. The loudspeakers crackled as instructors shouted orders. Hale was up in seconds, his boots half-tied, adrenaline firing before conscious thought. Smoke was already seeping through the hall vents, thick and chemical. He ran with Morales toward the east wing, joining the line of responders and facility personnel. The flames were visible even from 100 yards away, orange plumes punching through the night, lighting the compound like a burning dawn. They had all trained for chaos, but real chaos does not follow commands. The heat hit first, sharp and relentless. Servicemen worked in lines, passing extinguishers, hoses, trying to keep the fire from spreading to the supply depot. But someone shouted that 2 maintenance workers were still trapped inside. They were in Sector C's east corner. The flames roared, growing louder. A wall collapsed inward, spraying sparks like fireworks. Hale froze for half a second, staring at the collapse. He could hear the trapped voices, faint and distorted. His chest tightened. Then he heard another voice, steady, cutting cleanly through the noise. Move. Keep the line tight. Do not let it jump the corridor. It stopped him cold. That voice. He turned. Through the haze and thick smoke, a figure moved. Helmet, vest, face streaked with soot, eyes narrowed against the intense heat. Coach Mendez. She had returned. No one knew how she had gotten there. Perhaps she had been nearby for consulting. Perhaps she had never truly left. It did not matter. She was already coordinating as if she had never been gone, shouting over the radio, directing small teams, pulling 2 servicemen back from a collapsing beam. When she saw Hale, she did not smile. She just nodded once. She said that he knew the layout. Sector C's east side has a maintenance crawlway. 2 workers are trapped in there. He nodded, coughing through the smoke. He asked if they were alive. She replied, maybe. They would find out. The fire chief shouted for her to stay out, yelling that the area was unstable. Mendez, but she ignored him, grabbing gear from the truck. Hale followed, without hesitation. They went in low, crawling beneath the smoke. The world shrank to crackling flames, shifting metal, and the sound of their own breath echoing inside their masks. The crawlway was narrow, almost collapsed in several places. The heat pressed down like a hand attempting to crush them flat. Hale led with the flashlight. He shouted, "Over here." A faint voice answered, a man's voice, weak. It cried for help. They pushed through the debris, sparks falling like the embers of a dying star. The first worker was conscious but pinned under a fallen support structure. The second lay motionless nearby. Mendez went straight to the downed one, checking his pulse. She reported he was out cold but breathing. They must move fast. Hale tried to lift the beam pinning the first man, but it would not budge. Mendez said on 3, "You lift, I'll pull." 1, 2, 3. The beam shifted, but not enough. Hale grunted, his muscles straining, his vision blurring. She yelled again. The sound of metal groaning filled the space. Then, finally, a crack. The beam gave way. The man fell free. Mendez shouted, "Go! Take him out, now!" Hale dragged the man toward the exit, the fire licking at his sleeves. Behind him, something thundered. The ceiling began to collapse. He shouted for Mendez. She yelled back that she had the other one. "Go!" He turned back, saw her lifting the unconscious worker onto her shoulder, the flames closing in around her. He yelled no, running back in. He told her she would never make it alone. She yelled, "Move, serviceman." He ignored her. Together they stumbled through the smoke, both half blind, each step a struggle. The air was thick and bitter, the kind that scraped the throat raw. They burst through the exit just as the structure gave way behind them, an eruption of heat and light that threw them both to the ground. For a brief moment, everything went still. Then the sound rushed back, shouts, sirens, water spraying. Mendez rolled to her knees, coughing hard. She rasped that he was breathing, checking the worker's pulse. Both of them, they will make it. Hale turned to her, dazed. He said, "Coach, your arm." Her sleeve was burned through, the skin raw and blistered. She did not seem to notice. She said she was fine, her eyes scanning the scene. "Where is command? We need to contain the west side before—" Then her voice faltered. The adrenaline had drained as fast as it had arrived. She slumped slightly, steadying herself on one knee. Hale caught her before she fell. He told her, "Easy, you are done. Let the others finish." She looked at him, dazed, soot streaking her face. She said, "You did good, Hale." He replied, "So did you." For the first time since he had met her, she smiled, a genuine smile, tired and unguarded. She guessed the desert is not the only place with surprises. By dawn, the fire was extinguished. The facility was a mess, charred steel, blackened sand, but everyone made it out alive. The commander himself came down to the medical tent where Mendez sat, her arm wrapped, her eyes half closed from exhaustion. He said quietly that she broke every protocol they have, and she saved 4 people while doing it. She opened her eyes. She asked, "So is she fired or promoted?" He almost laughed. He replied, "Neither. Just do not disappear next time." Later that morning, the recruits gathered outside the barracks, silent as she approached them. Word of what she had done had already spread, how she had gone back in, how she had carried 2 men out by herself. There was no applause, just that heavy, quiet respect she always brought with her. She stopped in front of them, her face still bandaged. She said that training was suspended for 48 hours, but do not get soft. Life does not wait for you to recover. Then she looked at Hale. She asked if he still had that patch. He nodded, pulling it from his pocket, the coiled black snake. She smiled faintly. She told him to keep it. He had earned it twice now. He hesitated. He said, "It is yours, Coach." She replied, "Not anymore." She turned to leave, then paused. She said that when he is in command one day and everything goes sideways, he must remember what he did today. He did not freeze. He swallowed hard. He replied, "Because you did not." For a single heartbeat, She looked at him with something resembling pride. Then she walked away, the morning light catching on her ID tags, the smoke still drifting above the range like ghosts reluctant to depart. That evening, Hale stood outside alone. The stars were faint, blurred by the last of the haze. He could still hear echoes, the alarms, the shouting, her voice calling orders through the inferno. He knew this was the end. She would not stay after this. People like her never did. She came back to save them, and in doing so, reminded herself of the one truth she had been running from, that no matter how far you step away from the struggle, some part of it always stays inside you. He did not know if that was strength or punishment. Perhaps it was both. But he knew this: Black Mamba was not just a legend anymore. She was a reminder that real power is not loud, and real courage is not about never being afraid. It is about walking back into the inferno when the world needs you to. A week after the fire, the air at the facility finally cleared. The smoke had thinned, the metallic smell faded, but something lingered, not in the air, but in the people. There was a stillness now, a kind of reverence that had not been there previously. The recruits trained quieter and cleaner. They joked less, but they laughed deeper when they did. The difference was not discipline, it was purpose. Hale felt it most in the mornings. The rhythm she had built into them still guided his voice. "Move, trainees." He caught himself saying it with her same clipped edge, her same patience under pressure. The echo made the room feel less empty. She departed without ceremony. 2 days after the fire, her locker was cleared out again. There was no note this time, no
message. Just a single item was left behind: a folded gray hoodie hanging from the peg like a phantom. Hale knew better than to go searching for her. She was the kind of person who vanished when her work was completed, leaving only stories behind in her wake. Still, he could not help it. He walked out to the east training field at dusk, the very same field where she had first crushed their pride with those merciless circuits. The grass had grown back where the fire had scorched it, revealing uneven patches of green and black. He stood there for a long while, his hands in his pockets, listening to the wind hum through the flagpole ropes. Then he took out the patch, the coiled black snake, its edges burned, its threads fraying, and pinned it to his vest. She had told him it was not about taking lives. It was about stepping forward when everyone else froze. He understood that now. Months later, the recruits graduated. Family members filled the stands. Flags fluttered in the breeze, the facility band playing its slow, proud march. Hale stood at attention with the rest of them, his chest squared, his jaw set. He was not the best marksman or the fastest runner, but when command called for leadership, his name had come up first. After the ceremony, his commanding officer handed him an envelope. He said, "This came through last week. No sender." He thought Hale would want it. Inside was a single postcard. There was no picture on the front, just a faded black border. On the back, there were a few words written in sharp, clean handwriting. It said, "Proud of you, serviceman. Keep teaching 'em right. Signed, M." There was a small postmark, barely legible. It said, New Mexico. He smiled, tucking it into his breast pocket. He muttered that, it figures, she cannot sit still. That evening, after the graduation party died down, Hale found himself back in the training center. It was empty now. just the faint hum of the lights and the smell of old chalk still baked into the mats. He walked over to the mirror where she used to pace during the circuits, her reflection a constant, quiet shadow. He could still hear her voice stating, "You are not expiring, serviceman, just working." He sat down on the mat, leaned back against the wall, and he closed his eyes. In his mind, he saw her, hoodie pulled up, stopwatch around her neck, that calm, knowing look that could cut through anyone's nonsense. And for the very first time, he understood what she had truly given them. It was not just strength. It was not even discipline. She had given them permission to be human, to fail, to get back up, to care harder than they struggled. That was her true legacy. Years later, when Hale came back to the facility as an instructor himself, the training center had changed. New floors, better lighting, slicker equipment. But he made sure one thing remained the same. Every first day, before drills began, he would stand in front of the new recruits and say that they will think strength is about muscle, about grit. It is not. Strength is what you do when fear shows up and nobody is telling you what to do next. And then he would point to the wall above the mats, where a small framed patch now hung under glass. A coiled black snake. The plaque beneath it read, "Black Mamba, Facility 2020, Strength Behind Silence." The recruits always asked about it, wide-eyed and curious. And Hale would smile, just faintly. He would say that she trained half the organization before any of us knew her name, and she did not need medals to prove it. Then he would whistle once, sharp and clear, her signal, and start the warm-up. The room would fill with the same rhythm, the same breath, the same intensity that had once belonged to her. And in that sound, in every thud of boots, every grunt, every beat of effort, she was there again. Not a legend, not a ghost, just a presence. The kind that never truly leaves.